Merhaba, hoş geldiniz. 5. Uluslararası Taş Kongresi'nin mimarlık oturumlarına başlıyoruz. İlk konuğumuz Amin Taha, Londra'dan geliyor. Bizimle uygulama pratiklerini paylaşacak. Bu oturumun moderatörlüğünü çok sevgili arkadaşım Şebnem Yücel yürütecek. Şimdi Şebnem Hanım'ı kürsüye davet ediyorum ve söz onda.
Merhabalar, hepiniz hoş geldiniz. Mimarlık oturumlarının açılışını yapmak da büyük bir onur. İlk önce başında parçası olduğum bu organizasyon ekibinin daha sonra İstanbul'a taşınmama rağmen beni dahil edip davet etmesi beni gerçekten onurlandırdı. Hepinize çok teşekkür ediyorum. Sunumum İngilizce olacak. Simultane çeviri zaten konumuz için almışsınızdır diye tahmin ediyorum. Dolayısıyla benden itibaren İngilizce başlayacak ve devam edecek sunumlar. Okay. The title of my presentation is To Reconcile with the Stones. The title and the structure of my short introduction comes from a poem by a Scottish poet, Christopher Mary Grieve, better known by his pen name, Hugh MacDiarmid. The name of the poem is On a Raised Beach, which was first published in 1934 in his collection Stony Limits and Other Poems. The poem is partially about Shetland Islands, where he was living in the 30s, and partially about life and death, and some of the fundamental questions of our existence approached through the rocky landscape of the island. It's a very long poem, more than 400 lines, and here I will chop it down, not to give you a taste of this poem, but to selfishly form the structure of this presentation. We must be humble. We are so easily baffled by appearances. And do not realize that these stones are one with the stars. It makes no difference to them whether they are high or low, mountain peak or ocean floor, palace or pigsty. There are plenty of ruined buildings in the world, but no ruined stones. Stone probably is one of the, if not the oldest building material in the world. The sheer presence of rocks in nature, one that is powerful, beautiful, and monumental, has found its reflection in the built environment over the centuries, in marking the land for congregational and ritualistic purposes, in constructing dwellings that will stand strong against the force of nature, and in raising monumental structures to demonstrate the glory of the powerful to the subjects, and to the rivals, and to the heavens. At times, the construction of the structures lasted for decades, from the quarrying of the stone to its transportation, its carving to its placement. The process posed many challenges. Challenges of physical capacity, economy, and time. Buildings of such scale were there to astonish, were there to last. Maybe in ruins, they did last for centuries. All through the centuries, stone was an important material, both structurally and aesthetically. In the urban examples, the uses were finer, and their finesse was achieved through impeccable craftsmanship that did not only take a lot of time, but also money. These were generally structures of symbolic importance, civic or private, but almost always a status symbol, a symbol of power. Depending on the availability of local stones, rural vernacular uses were more practical. They were rougher, required less finesse, sometimes were quaint or picturesque, but almost always a good match for the climate and terrain they were placed in. With the development of modern construction systems, especially of the reinforced concrete skeleton frame, the role of the stone rapidly changed in architecture. Separation, and at times so-called freeing of a building's facade from its structural system, brought an end to the rind of stone as a preferred load-bearing material. The discourse that favored such sidelining, praised lightness in structures and materials, presented the possibilities for transparency and open plan as more democratic and economic options that placed architecture in the service of the masses. This didn't necessarily point to a fall from grace for stone, since it continued to be used in many designs, both in the interior and exterior, maybe not structurally, but visually, spatially, to convey refined taste and or to communicate power. Part 2. What happens to us is irrelevant towards geology, but what happens towards geology is not irrelevant to us. We must reconcile ourselves to the stones, not the stones to us. If we follow the terminology popularized by Nobel laureate scientist Paul Crutzen, we are living in the times of Anthropocene. This geologic time period is marked by the human influenced geologic indicators. Today, the global extent of our actions have reached an alarming level. From the sourcing of raw materials to the construction of a building, from inhabiting and using that building to its final demolishment, building and construction industry is a major source of CO2 emissions in the world. In fact, running buildings alone account for 40 to 45% of CO2 emissions in developed countries. Considering this, it is absolutely necessary to reconsider the way we extract, use and discard materials. It in fact is the time to accept the obvious fact that it is highly relevant for us what happens towards geology. As geologists, as material suppliers and as architects, we need to be promoting sustainable practices. The contemporary uses of stone are varied. Today, majority of what we can call as urban vernacular examples use stone mainly for cladding. It is also still possible to witness modern masonry structures in the rural settings, mostly as homes for well-to-do urbanites who became wary of city life. There are also those reinforced concrete structures with very thin stone claddings that parade around as traditional structures, especially in touristic seaside towns in Turkey, some of which are very close to our current location. In such cases, facade is mainly there for image making, a maker of the country style, a poor signifier of a past idyllic life, like it was never lived. Such uses of stone hides behind excuses of economy, lightness of structure, and the lack of craftsmanship. When we consider the environmentally harmful effects of quarrying stone, we need to be more measured in how and for what we use it. We also need to face another reality regarding stone, deserted stone quarries. What happens to a quarry after mining is suspended? Does it continue to sit there like a heat scar on the landscape? What are the ways to rehabilitate the landscape, or at least any strategies for adaptive reuse? There are not many examples, like the ancient quarries of Dionysus in Greece, where the scarred landscape was given a new life, a total recovery. Nearly 20 years after the suspension of mining in the quarry, landscape architects Kozuki and landscape architect and sculptor Golanda turned the site into an open-air museum with minimum touches possible. The result is quite poetic. It's time to re-evaluate the prevailing habits in design and in construction. The choices should be made towards achieving smaller ecological footprints, which require an awareness of the waste, as much as the product itself. Some might argue that the symbolic and cultural qualities that are communicated through stone cannot be always measured in such equations. They might be right. In their design for the General Society of Authors and Publishers Central Office, Ensemble Studio assembled irregular-sized ashlars from the quarry as a modern sculpture, creating a wall facing the garden on the site. Framing a rather public passageway, this facade also formed a fitting gesture to the historic site of Santiago de Compostela. In another example, Chinese Pritzker laureate Wang Shu's amateur architecture studio used stones, bricks and tiles from demolished villages on the site in the construction of this history museum. Here, more than the recycled value, the memory contained and represented by these materials came to the fore. And in the Armadillo Vault by Block Research Group from ETH, we witnessed a contemporary stone structure that was developed from a close study of traditional stone wall systems. Through specially designed and cut stone shells, this structure worked without any need for reinforcement or mortar. They are the space-defining elements. I would like to end this presentation with one last example. Part 3. It will be ever increasingly necessary to find in the interests of all mankind, man capable of rejecting all that all other men think, as a stone remains essential to the world, inseparable from it, and rejects all other life yet. Great work cannot be combined with surrender to the crowd. This last example is the work designed by Grooveworks plus Amintaha Architects, our keynote speaker. And I need to mention that I'm really impressed by this fact. Since 2014, Grooveworks plus Amintaha Architects is an employee ownership trust. Well, 15 Clerkenwell Close is a game changer, showing how stone is and will continue to be an important element in our architectural vocabulary. While the building stands out in the neighborhood with its unusually unfinished load-bearing stone facade, it's the narrator of the history and the context of its site. As a subtext, it also narrates where the stone has been, even how it was formed, how it was excavated, and how it transfers the building modes. The architectural gestures in every scale are unified, not for the sake of creating a style, but to communicate the uniqueness of being in that place, in that specific time. 15 Clerkenwell Close also challenges our current modernist prejudices, especially regarding the use of stone in terms of construction economy, speed, and even sustainability. The exoskeleton limestone facade is not only a reference to the abbey that once stood on the site, but it also is the reason why this building has 90% less carbon embodied compared to steel or concrete structures, and how it was built for nearly 25% of their costs. Well, without further ado, I would like to welcome and invite our keynote speaker, Amintaha from London's Grooveworks plus Amintaha Architects.
Thank you for that introduction. You've covered everything I have to say about that building. Joking. Okay, I've got a presentation which is in PDF, so it doesn't operate with this. I'll just have to pretend. Hopefully these guys will follow my cue, so bear with me. Right, first try. First slide. Okay. I'd like to start off with just a description of how we approach work. So for some time, most of us worked in other people's offices, including Zaha's, Wilkinson Hare, Foster's, Rogers, etc., typically in London. So the people in our office come from those sort of backgrounds. So inevitably, especially if you move from one office to the other, most offices will tell you very quickly, that's not how we do it, we have a particular style, a house style as it were. And if you do that often enough, you realise, well, I can pretty much do any style. Yeah. What's to discriminate one style from another apart from it's the house style? And practices get used to it, clients get used to it, they'll deliberately go to that practice for a particular product, won't they? So we'll look at Zaha's or Gary, etc., and they're excellent at what they do. And they have a particular style, and clients will often say, I need that particular product, the same as you've done successfully elsewhere. The same success will come to me if I get exactly the same product. All those and many other motivations are there to, if you like, limit, as an architect, what you can do or might investigate in other areas you might investigate. So I'd like to start off with, so at some point we questioned exactly that. We all come from those different backgrounds. Are we going to generate our own house style eventually? How does that arrive at? And through those questions we were actually using, perhaps, I'm going to use Vasari, Giorgio Vasari, as an example of how we might better define style. So Giorgio Vasari, in the middle of the 1500s, 16th century, wrote effectively the first history of art and architecture book, not as formally as we recognise it today. He wrote a book called The Lives of the Most Excellent Artists, Architects and Sculptors. And because of that period, there was no formal